There was once a king who pointed up at the sun and told his people, "That is me. When the sun falls out of the sky, then, and only then, will I fall." And below him, the people he had worked half to death in his fields looked up at that same sun and wished one thing, quietly, that it would fall soon. His name was Jie. He was the last king of the Xia, the first dynasty China ever had. You may remember how that dynasty began. Yu the Great had tamed the Great Flood and divided the land into 9 provinces. And when he died, the throne did not pass to the worthiest man. It passed to his son. From that day, the world belonged to one family. The Xia ran on like that for 400 years, one king after another, until it came down to Jai, by which time there was no one left who remembered what Yu had looked like, standing at the edge of the water. Every people that has ever raised a king up above itself has had to face the same question, sooner or later. What do you do when the king becomes a monster? This was about 3,600 years ago. Far to the west, the pyramids of Egypt had already stood in the desert for nearly 1,000 years. In Babylon, a king had carved his laws into a tall pillar of stone and called them a gift handed down to him by a god. In most of that old world, the question already had its answer. A king ruled because the gods had chosen him, and what the gods gave, they did not take back. To raise a hand against the king was to raise it against heaven itself. The East was about to give a different answer. A house 400 years old does not fall in a day, and it does not fall because of one man alone. But it was Jai who sat at the top of the Xia when the weight of all those years finally came down. Jai had not always been a monster. They say he was born with the strength of a giant, that he could straighten an iron hook in his bare hands, that he could fight a tiger and win. But he turned all that strength inward, onto himself. He built a palace so tall you could not see the top of it, with a terrace of carved jade they called the Jade Tower. No one ever counted how many men died hauling the stone for it. From the top of the Jade Tower, on a clear day, you could see all the way to the edge of the kingdom. From up there, the people were too small to make out. The fields were a pattern, the rivers were thin, bright lines, and the smoke of the cooking fires, where there was still smoke, was just weather. Jie liked the view from the top. He loved a woman named Moshi. Moshi liked the sound of silk being torn, so in the palace they tore fine silk for her by the bolt, a hand's width at a time, all day long, close beside her ear. While outside the palace wall, there were people without a single whole garment to cover themselves. A minister knelt before him and begged him to stop. Jai only laughed. "There is a sun in the sky," he said, "and there is me on the earth. Does the sun ever fall?" The man who had knelt never stood up again. After that, the court learned to praise him. The only honest voices left in the Xia were out in the fields, where the king could not hear them. The grain rotted in the fields, because every able-bodied man had been dragged off to build the tower or to fight the king's wars. The granaries stood open and empty, and the men who came to collect the king's share took what little was left. At the wells, the old watched the villages thin out around them. No one looked toward the capital anymore. Not for help, not for mercy, not even for a reason. They had stopped praying for rain, stopped praying for a good harvest. They prayed for one thing only, that the sun would hurry up and fall. To the east, there was a small tribe called Shang, and its chief was a man named Tang. Tang had none of Jia's strength, and none of Jia's towers. But when people said his name, their voices went soft. There is a story, they tell. One day, out in the open country, Tang came upon a man who had spread his nets on all four sides, praying to the sky. Everything that flies, everything that runs, everything from every direction, let it all come into my net. Tang went over and took down 3 of the 4 sides, and he changed the man's prayer. Those who want to go left, he said. Those who want to go right. Only the ones with no wish to live. Let them come into the net. The story travelled. The other chiefs heard it and said, Tang's kindness reaches even the birds and the beasts. And that is how the loyalty of a whole land begins to move. Not in a battle, but over something as small as a net. After that, chiefs who had never met Tang began sending word that they would stand with him. They had seen what the king in the west did to living men. They had heard what this one had done for animals. At Tang's side was a man named Yi Yin. Yi Yin had come up from nothing. The story is that he began as a cook. But Tang did not care where he had come from. Tang wanted what was inside his head. The 2 of them would talk until the sky went pale, about a single question. What is it exactly that makes a man fit to sit above everyone else? Jie had noticed the stirring in the east. He summoned Tang and shut him up in a place called Xia Tai. But after a while, he let him go again. Jie could not believe that so soft a man would ever amount to anything. Yi Yin had gone, once, to see the court of the Xia with his own eyes. When he came back, he did not tell Tang how many soldiers Jie had, or how many walled towns. He told him this. The people of the Xia were already wishing their own king dead. And a king whose own people wish him gone, he said, is a king whose heaven has already half come down over his head. Tang did not say anything for a while. It was not the kind of news a careful man is glad to hear. So Tang went to war. On the day he marched, what he said to the men who followed him was not, I mean to be king. He said, It is not that I, a small man, dare to rise against my lord. It is that the crimes of the Xia have grown too many, and heaven has commanded me to punish them. It was the first time in that world that a man raised an army in the name of heaven to bring down a king. And the meaning under those words is something the Chinese would carry for the next 3,000 years, that no one sits in that seat forever. Heaven gives it to you because you are worthy of it. The day you are not, heaven takes it back and hands it to the next man. That question, from the very beginning, what do you do when the king becomes a monster? The East had written its answer into this one war. The 2 armies met at a place called Mingtiao. Tang's was the smaller army. It did not matter. The sky went dark that day. They say a great wind came up behind Jia's army and drove straight into their faces, so they could not keep their eyes open. And Jia's soldiers had never wanted to die for him to begin with. Some of them threw down their weapons and simply turned and ran for home. Jia stood and watched his own army come apart around him, the way a riverbank comes apart in a flood. Jia lost. He fled south, all the way to a place called Nanchao, and they say that before he died there, in exile, he said only one thing, that he regretted not killing Tang back when he had held him at Xia Tai. The Xia, the first dynasty China ever had, after 400 years, ended there. Tang took the seat. He did not move into Jia's tower that scraped the sky, and the Shang, the second of China's dynasties, began. The answer the old world had never waited to hear. The East had now given for the first time. That what heaven puts into a king's hands, heaven can take back out of them. But after the Shang was founded, the rain would not come. 1 year, then another. For 7 years, a great drought. The rivers dried, the ground cracked open, and that sun, the one the people had once cursed, now burned Tang's own land, yellow and dead. The same wells that had stood empty under Jia stood empty again. The land did not care which king sat above it. Children who had been born when the Shang began were 7 years old now, and had never once seen a full harvest. There were those who said the only way to call down the rain was to offer heaven a living person. Tang said, "I am asking for rain for the sake of the people. How can I spend the people to buy it?" No one knew better than Tang what it meant when the sky shut itself against a king. The last time it happened, he had been the one heaven sent to answer it. Now the sky was shut again, and this time it was shut over him. So he went into the mulberry grove himself. He cut off his hair. He cut his nails. He made himself into the offering. He knelt on the cracked earth, the same cracked earth his people were standing on, and counted out his own faults one by one. Is it because I have governed badly? Is it because I have left the people without a living? Is it because I built my halls too high? And on and on. No one answered him. The sky stayed white and shut. They say he had not finished counting when the clouds drew together from every direction, and the rain came down. Jia had said he was the sun, and that nothing could ever make him fall. Tang said he was only a man, kneeling to beg heaven's pardon for the sake of his people. One of them had made the whole world his own. The other had given himself to the whole world. And which kind of man belongs in that seat? That the Chinese remembered. The Xia fell, and the Shang rose, and the world understood for the first time that a dynasty is not forever. Jia had believed he was the sun, but the sun too comes down, and many, many years from now, the Shang will come down to its own last king. When it does, there will be another tribe in the east, and another leader with a gentle name, who will stand up and say almost exactly the same words. Heaven has sent me. That seat would change hands like this, again and again, in the name of the mandate of heaven. And the sky stayed where it had always been, over every head, watching and saying nothing. From here, the story of China steps into the long river of dynasties, rising and falling one after another.